Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final edition of the Live Ones College Football Preview. We have reached the end, folks. Our last conference preview is the nigh unstoppable perennial juggernaut that is the SEC. For now, anyway. Home of the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs, who finally, at long last, in year 6 of the Kirby Smart era, finally got over the hump, and with a defense that will go down in history as one of the greatest single-season assemblages of talent in the history of college football, beat the ever-loving crap out of everyone they faced, including, most importantly, that all-elusive victory over Alabama in the national title game. But it cannot be denied that while the Big Two reigned supreme overall, it was most certainly a down year for the conference last year. We saw the seeds of it in Week 1 when LSU went down in prime time to the unranked UCLA, the beginning of a 6-6 campaign that saw Coach O shown the door. It continued in Week 2 when Tennessee, remember last year when everyone was so fired up about Tennessee and how exciting they were going to be on offense? Well, they went down to Kenny Pickett and Pittsburgh at home en route to a 7-5 year. Week 3, Memphis beat Mississippi State. The Bulldogs would eventually go 7-5. Auburn lost to a really subpar Penn State team. They'd go 6-6. Florida was disappointing. They went 6-6. Basically, everyone who wasn't Alabama or Georgia failed to live up to expectations last year. They went 3-7 in their non-playoff bowl games. Names that in normal years you wouldn't have given a chance to beat them. UCF beat Florida. Kansas State beat LSU. Is this conference on the downswing? Are they going to be able to recover in the wake of all the behind-the-scenes machinations to supplant them as college football's preeminent conference? Let's take a deep dive and find out. Start off, of course, in alphabetical order with the Alabama Crimson Tide, 13-2 SEC champions. Typical Alabama season. Head and shoulders above everyone else in the country. But come the national championship game, whole different story. No Jamison Williams, no John Mechie. Bama can't do a damn thing against the number one defense in the country. And Mr. Grumpy, Nick Saban, had a lot of things to say this offseason, didn't he? Doesn't like the NIL deals, thinks Texas A&M bought their team. I'm sorry, but that just... Any SEC coach accusing anyone else of buying their team is just the most laughable shit imaginable. But Nick Saban, in particular... Anyhow, Alabama, as it typically does, lost 7 starters to the draft. That's actually kind of a down year for them. The consistency on both sides of the ball should actually be pretty good this year. You've got Bryce Young back at quarterback and already being talked about as a repeat Heisman Trophy winner. He led an offense that was 7th in the nation overall, averaging 488 yards a game, 6th in scoring, averaging 40 points per outing, number 3 in third down conversions. Najee Harris obviously is a big piece to replace, but Alabama's always got the next man waiting in the wings at that position, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech. Gibbs was your prototypical all-purpose receiving back with 1,200 scrimmage yards and 10 touchdowns, playing for a really bad Georgia team that really didn't give him great blocking. Look for him to absolutely go off this year playing for the Tide. The Tide have been known for producing absolutely ridiculously talented NFL-caliber wide receivers on a regular basis the past couple of years. They're hoping Georgia transfer Jermaine Burton is going to be the next one. Burton caught 53 passes for 901 yards and 8 touchdowns over the last 2 years, averaging 17 yards per catch. And now he'll get a shot to be a volume catcher. The D was the best it's been in years with a dominant pass rush, a stifling run defense, allowed just 304 yards and 20 points a game. Even so, by SEC standards, it could be a lot better. The front 7 is anchored by Will Anderson, who just put up insane numbers last year. 17.5 sacks and 35 tackles for loss in 1 year. This guy is just someone there's no answer for. The secondary is loaded with future NFL draft picks. This team's just stacked at every position that's not the offensive line. Schedule-wise, this team is going to murder Texas in the opener. It's going to be great to watch. It's going to be so embarrassing. Texas A&M is a home game, but that comes right after going to Arkansas and right before a trip to Tennessee. So I don't know. If you're looking for a loss, that's probably a good place to look. Mississippi State and Auburn have to come to Tuscaloosa, but both teams should be better than they were last year. You know the last time Alabama lost more than 2 games in the regular season? 2010. It's unfathomable how good this team has been for how long that you can count all of their losses in the past 8 years, including the playoffs, on 2 hands. So who can beat them this year? A&M, for sure. They've got the personnel. Auburn always gets up for the Iron Bowl. That's it. 2 losses max. I think 11-1, and winning the SEC West is much more likely. Arkansas. No one, absolutely no one. I defy you. Go back and look at my preview. Go back and look at everybody else's preview prior to the season last year. Nobody, not even Arkansas fans, thought the Razorbacks were going to be anywhere near as good as they were last year. I had them pegged at 5 wins, just FYI. They won 9. They did it with great line play, solid defense, and with a smart style that just worked. It was just good, solid football all around. The offense took off under offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, and now it should just keep on rolling. The Hogs led the SEC in rushing. They had the 10th most efficient passing game in the country, and they averaged 442 yards and 31 points per game overall. KJ Jefferson came out of nowhere to be a killer dual-threat quarterback with 21 touchdowns through the air and another 6 on the ground, and he should only get better with another year of experience. He did lose his best target, Treylon Burks, to the draft, so someone else is going to have to step up there. On defense, the transfer portal brings a big boost to the secondary with Latavius Brinney coming in from Georgia to take one safety spot and Dwight McLaurin stepping in from LSU to take over at corner. The Hogs often play a 4-1-6 set, and it did pay dividends last year. They came up with 13 interceptions, but it does make the team a little weak up front, and I'm worried about what opposing running backs like Tank Bisbee and Jahmyr Gibbs are going to be able to do to them. Schedule-wise, this team's not going to surprise anyone anymore, and everybody just knows how good they are now. They get LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama at home, Cincinnati, BYU, and Auburn on the road. That is a tough damn slate. I think this team might take a step backward this year, but only a step. I make it an 8-4 team. Hopefully this stretch of good play will really help them out with their recruiting. The Auburn Tigers. Not as disappointing as some of the other teams in the SEC. I don't think people had much in the way of expectations in Brian Harsin's first year. Yes, he was phenomenal during his time at Boise State, but the SEC represents a very big step up in competition, obviously. It was also clear he just really didn't click with Bo Nix. He much preferred LSU transfer TJ Finley under center and making Tank Bigsby the centerpiece of the offense. Apart from Bigsby, though, the offense just really never got going all year. It got plenty of yards to its credit, but it just couldn't get the points it needed in any clutch spots. I think they're going to try to be much more balanced with Eric Kaisal, the receivers coach, taking over at the offensive coordinator spot. There's really not a standout receiver with Kobe Hudson gone to UCF, so someone's going to have to step up and become a star under the new system. The defense gets itself a really big heavy hitter in the transfer portal with 328-pound Jason Jones coming in from Oregon. The sophomore got limited playing time in his redshirt freshman year with the Ducks, but he really made the most of the time he did have on the field with 19 tackles and 1.5 sacks. He's got the size, the explosiveness, and the power to really make an impact on some of these running attacks right away. The secondary, to be diplomatic, got shredded last year, even with the parts they had. And 3 of those starters are now gone. There's just a lot of question marks about how this team's going to hold up against some of these monster passing attacks in the SEC West. Looking at the schedule, man, it's not friendly. Not at all. Road dates at Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Mississippi State, and at Alabama to go along with home games against Arkansas and Texas A&M. This team has a max of 6 winnable games on its schedule. Max. The recruiting under Harsin has got to start getting a lot better. The Florida friggin' Gators. I had really, really high hopes for this team, especially after watching them hang with Alabama step for step in the Week 3 game, being a 2-point conversion away from taking them to overtime, but they just never followed it up. They lost 4 out of 5 in October, and just like that, it was it for Dan Mullen. Just gone. Enter the whiz kid, Billy Napier, the man who put Louisiana football and the Sun Belt Conference itself on the map. One of these young whippersnappers who gets it, who understands the way the wind's blowing in college football from the very start. He embraced the transfer portal and name, image, and likeness deals. The guy hired a director of recruiting innovation. He hired a game changer coordinator, whatever the hell that means, a director of research and evaluation, and most importantly, a director of player engagement and NIL. Nick Saban looks at this man and sees the devil incarnate, let me tell you. They've got a new quarterback and a guy that looks like he was custom built for the NFL in 6'4", 237-pound Anthony Richardson. Napier brought star running back Montrell Johnson over from Louisiana. He should be the every down back right away, but we're going to have to see how he fares against the tough defenses of the SEC. It's definitely a step up in competition. The defense needs a lot of work. The Gators were 10th in the SEC in scoring defense, 51st in the nation overall, and they had major issues against the run in way too many big games. Leading tackler, the linebacker Mohamed Diabate, is off to Utah, and a few of the other parts of last year's linebacker core are gone too. However, Ventrell Miller is back after suffering a torn biceps early on last year. This guy was the leading tackler on the team in 2020. The team's leading tackler from last year, Trey Dean, is back at safety after making 91 stops. And the third leading tackler, Rashad Torrance, is back after coming up with 87 tackles and a team-leading 3 interceptions. Apart from the secondary, though, the front seven is a patchwork of young guys and transfers. I really doubt this is going to be a 6-6 team again. There's just a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball, and they should pick apart a lot of the weaker teams in the East. They also missed all the toughest teams from the West. No Alabama, no Ole Miss, no Arkansas, no Auburn, no Mississippi State. They do play their out-of-conference game against Utah. That's going to be a toss-up. Tennessee and LSU are toss-ups. Georgia and Texas A&M should both be losses. I think this team can get itself back up to 8 wins and start looking towards the future with their young hotshot of a coach. Let's talk the defending national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs. They finally got over the hump after years and years and years of being in the mix, but always coming up just a little bit short. The reason is very simple. Georgia, along with Alabama, has been so consistently good with its recruiting for so long that there was never a need to catch lightning in a bottle like LSU did in 2019. It was just a question of what the year was going to be where it all came together in such force with all the 4-star and 5-star recruits that there would just be no one who could stop them. And that was 2021. The numbers this defense put up were beyond insane. Forget best defense in the country last year. This was one of the greatest single-season defensive performances of all time. You'd have to go back to the Miami Hurricanes 2001 team to find a defense so thoroughly shut down everyone they faced. The difference being that Hurricanes team did it with an excessive amount of turnovers. They got 45 turnovers on the season, nearly 4 per game. So they had, insane statistics in terms of, scoring defense, yardage defense, and everything like that because their opponents just never had the ball. This Georgia team was just a brick wall. And now the question is, what are they going to do this year? 5 members of that defense were drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. That is so insane to think about. 15 of their 22 starters from last year's team are now gone. This is going to be a whole new Bulldogs team this year. So do they have the recruiting pipeline to replace all that top-tier talent? Well, on defense, let's come back to that. We'll start on offense. The defense might have been the star of the show, but, the other side of the ball, hey, they did their part. They averaged 443 yards and 38 points a game. You're averaging 38 points a game on offense. I know it's because the defense is giving you so many chances. You're going to win every game doing that. Stetson Bennett is not going to make anyone's list of top quarterbacks, and he was frequently subbed out for JT Daniels when he wasn't performing up to snuff. But he was perfectly fine in terms of efficiency, as his top targets weren't his wide receivers, but they were his tight ends. Brock Bowers led the team with 56 catches for 882 yards and 13 touchdowns, and Darnell Washington is basically a 6th offensive lineman with how massive a man he is on the other tight end slot. The offense loses the great running back tandem of Zamir White and James Cook, so look for Kenny McIntosh to be the future back. On defense, how do you replace Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Lewis Sine? How do you lose the defense, the defensive coordinator, Dan Lanning, and repeat one of the most historically all-time great performances? You do it through recruiting. Next man up. And the next man to watch for this year on defense is going to be Jalen Carter. 51 tackles for 3 sacks and 11.5 tackles for loss over the last 2 years working from the nose tackle position. He got overshadowed by all the NFL-bound talent last year, but scouts have already pegged him as a top 10 pick in next year's draft. This is going to be his year to shine. The table is set for him. Sophomore Kaylee Ringo was the hero of the national championship game. He made 34 tackles with 2 picks and 10 broken up passes with a sack in his freshman season. This kid has not even come close to hitting his ceiling yet. Nakobe Dean's replacement in the linebacker core is senior Nolan Smith, had 96 tackles with 8.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, an interception, and 3 forced fumbles with 3 broken up passes in the last 3 years. He's going to have no trouble stepping up into a leadership role during his last season to impress the NFL scouts. Basically, Georgia's a pipeline to the NFL on defense right now. There's always going to be another player to step up and replace the talent that has to leave. Even with all the superstar losses on defense and even with a few key parts gone in offense, Georgia should be favored in all 12 of its regular season games. They don't have to play Alabama. They don't have to play Texas A&M. No Ole Miss, no Arkansas, no LSU. The road games at South Carolina, Missouri, Mississippi State, and Kentucky are all manageable, obviously. The only teams that I think might stand a chance against them are Oregon and Florida. 11-1 and an SEC title game appearance, I think, will be the worst this team can possibly do as they look to make it a repeat. Kentucky, one of the only pleasantly good surprises about this conference last year. They went 10-3. That's their second 10-win season in the last 4 years. This program is definitely on the rise, certainly compared to where they used to be. Can they manage expectations now, though? That's the big question. Will Levis has found a home as the Wildcats quarterback. He threw for over 2,800 yards with 24 touchdowns last season and ran for 9 scores on top of it. However, he did lose his top 2 receivers in Wandale Robinson and Josh Ali. And while this program's on the rise, it's not an elite enough level where you can automatically say there's going to be 1, let alone 2 next men up that can repeat that kind of production. So expect running back Chris Rodriguez to get a lot more work. I mean, he was already a production machine for this offense with 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns, and now he's going to be expected to do even more. The defense allowed just 340 yards per game. They were great against the run, and they finally got over their problems that they were having on third down to allow just 22 points a game. Like the offense, though, a lot of the key parts are done. The one place they're fine is at the linebacker position, at least. Leading sacker Jay Weaver is back in the rotation at the jack spot. Leading tackler Jaquez Jones, coming off an 85-tackle season, returns for one more year in the middle of the core. Throw-in veteran DeAndre Square on the outside, and the mid-range threats are going to be nicely handled. The secondary is helmed by Tyrell Ajian in what will probably be his swan song as a football player. 121 tackles, 4 interceptions, 9 broken up passes over 4 seasons. Schedule-wise, it's tough, not going to lie. They have to play Florida, Tennessee, and Ole Miss on the road, and they get Georgia the second to last week of the season when they're already going to be super beat up from the grind. Can they repeat as a 10-win team again? I don't know. I mean, it lost a lot of talent from last year that they've got to replace, but 8 wins? That's not out of the question at all. Welcome to LSU, Brian Kelly. Hey, did you win them a national title yet? No, really. Where's our national title? That's the expectation for every coaching hire this school makes. Nick Saban, Les Miles, Ed Orgeron. National title winners all. And even winning one doesn't make you immune if things go south afterwards, as all 3 coaches can attest to. This is a school that has very high expectations for its football teams, and they don't give you a very long honeymoon period. So what's the longtime Notre Dame coach working with here? Well, still hasn't named a quarterback because Miles Brennan opted to retire from football rather than play for this team even one more minute, leaving Jaden Daniels to compete against Garrett Nussmeier. Daniels is considered the favorite, and he's seen the bulk of the first-team reps recently, but don't expect a decision before week 1. No matter who's under center, the main man might have the best wide receiver in college football to throw to in Kayshon Boutte. In 2020, Boutte had 45 catches for 735 yards and 5 touchdowns, and then he took 38 receptions for 509 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. He has speed, athleticism, and big play ability. The only question about him is his injury history. If he's good to go this year, you're looking at a first-round NFL draft pick for sure. The defense has some talent, but also some holes. The line's got 2 really good ends in B.J. Ojulari and Ali Gay, who combined for 9.5 sacks and 14.5 tackles for loss last year, but they are weak in the middle. The secondary has a pair of good corners in Jarek Bernard Converse and Sevyn Banks, but they are weak at the safety position. The linebacker core is raw and young, and they really haven't had anybody step up yet. It was definitely where opposing offenses ate last year. Schedule-wise, I think even LSU fans are going to give Brian Kelly 1 year to settle into the job, but they're going to want to see improvement over 6-6. At least they don't have to play Georgia, and their out-of-conference Power 5 is a very weak Florida State. But UAB is also on their out-of-conference slate, and they are very sneaky good. Getting Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Mississippi State at home is great. Obviously, they're not going to be favored against Alabama, Arkansas, or Texas A&M. And the combination of that and UAB might actually result in 4 straight losses to end the season. That's going to suck. Call Florida a toss-up game. 7-5, I think, is reasonable to expect for Kelly's first year. If he pulls off 8-4, I think the fans are going to feel really, really good about the hire. The Mississippi State Bulldogs did exactly what everyone thought and knew they were going to do in Mike Leach's second year. The team and the air raid system balled the fuck out and knocked off a strong NC State team. They got by Auburn and Kentucky, and in one of the biggest moments of the season, they beat Texas A&M. But they still went 7-5. Mike Leach teams don't win conference titles or even get close to them. He's there to make future NFL quarterbacks and wide receivers and give entertaining press conferences. That's all he does, and he does it well. But overlooked last year was that this was actually a pretty decent defense to go along with the offense. It was a big loss when veteran playmaker Aaron Brule took off for Michigan State, but the linebacking core does get back the team's top 2 tacklers, Jet Johnson and Nathaniel Watson. Jalen Green and Colin Duncan are once again going to make a whole lot of tackles in the middle of the secondary. Unlike most Mike Leach programs, this team's going to have no trouble controlling the clock and getting the other team off the field. Will Rogers just turned the offense absolutely up to 11 last year. He threw for a record 4,739 yards with 36 touchdowns. Freaking insane, those numbers. 104 catch Makai Polk is off to the Baltimore Ravens, and Malik Heath left for Ole Miss, but you still have Jaden Walley as an NFL caliber wide receiver who was second on the team with 628 yards on 55 catches with 6 touchdowns. Schedule-wise, East Tennessee State and Bowling Green are cupcakes. Memphis is going to be a revenge spot. That should be a win. Texas A&M, Alabama, and Georgia, as tough as it is to have to play all three of those teams, they are all at home. Don't be surprised if they can beat A&M again. It's 50-50 toss-ups the rest of the way. There's no reason this team can't improve another notch with this offense and get up to 8-4. Missouri did Missouri things and went 500. It's what they do. It's all they do. Ever since losing the 2014 SEC championship to Alabama, that's what Missouri is. They're 42-43. This program just can't break through upwards or downwards, no matter how their recruiting is, because the rest of the SECs is just perennially better. Mizzou's got some highly touted recruits coming up through their system, but it just seems like none of them are ready yet. Brady Cook will be the starting quarterback, a redshirt sophomore. Cook appeared in 5 games last season, was very, very accurate. 350 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Completed an insanely high amount of his passes, something like I think 78 or 79%. He also ran for 134 yards and a touchdown. Leading yardage receiver Toski Dove is back after coming up with 576 yards, but he's just filling time really until 5-star recruit Luther Burden is ready to be the team's number one. The defense needs to do a whole lot more than it did last year. It was the second worst overall in the SEC, dead last in the conference against the run. It got pounded on over and over and over, and it allowed 24 points or more in every single game except one in which they allowed 23. Florida transfer Tyron Hopper should be the team's leading tackler in the middle of the linebacking core. The team's best player on either side right now is junior cornerback Chris Abrams-Drain. He made 37 tackles last year with 3 picks, 7 broken up passes, and 1 recovered fumble. This kid should make it to the NFL one day, but he needs this year and next year to really develop at his new position. Looking at the schedule, Louisiana Tech, Abilene Christian, New Mexico State, and a home game against Vanderbilt should all be wins. So you only need 2 more to match last year's win total. At Kansas State, at Florida, at South Carolina, at Tennessee. I mean, maybe they can beat South Carolina. The other 3 are going to be a stretch. Georgia and Kentucky are both going to be home losses. They need 1 more win. I think they're going to have to steal one against Auburn. 6-6 again, best they can do. Sorry, Tigers fans, it's all this program's got. Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin did Lane Kiffin things in his second year with the Rebels. Absolutely lit the place on fire on offense and was actually much improved on the defensive side of the ball. Worked their way into the top 15 despite losses to Alabama and Auburn, and eventually made their way into the top 10 by the end of the year. Beat Arkansas in one of the most thrilling games of the year. I mean, I was glued to my TV when I was watching that. It was the team's first winning season since 2015. The offense looks to be strong again, even with Matt Corral going to the NFL. Sophomores Luke Outmyer and Jackson Dart continue to split the first and second team reps in training camp. I think Lane knows that as soon as he names a starter, the other guy's off to the transfer portal, so he's just holding off as long as possible. Either man should be able to match Corral's multi-talented production. The running backs are starting over, but the Rebels did get Zach Evans from TCU and Ulysses Bentley from SMU. Those two combined for over 3,000 yards of total offense and 27 scores at their respective schools, so that position's going to be just fine. Wide receivers, again, every skill possession player in America that's not on Ohio State or Alabama wants to come play for Lane Kiffin. Jordan Watkins coming in from Louisville, Malik Heath from Mississippi State should be the best of the lot. UCF's Jalen Robinson, very dangerous deep threat. You're getting tight end Michael Trigg out of USC, who should be a starter right away. The defense was good by Lane Kiffin standards, but it's still got a lot of work to do in order to be a contender for the SEC's title. The safeties have playmakers. They've got leading returning tackler Otis Reese back after finishing third on the team with 91 tackles. A.J. Finley's back. He was a 90-tackle season, and he led the team with 3 interceptions. And you're getting Isheem Young from Iowa State, who made 105 tackles and forced 5 fumbles in 2 years. But this team is weaker up front, and they're going to get run on a lot, just like they did last year. Schedule-wise, everything depends on how well these new pieces gel together, but the good news is that they get a really good stretch to figure it out in September with Troy, Central Arkansas, Georgia Tech, and Tulsa. Those should be 4 easy wins baked into the schedule. Once late October comes around, though, look out. At LSU, at Texas A&M, home against Alabama, and at Arkansas, and then they have to close it out in the Egg Bowl. I think it's a battle between this team and A&M for second place in the SEC West behind Alabama. Maybe Arkansas will be in there as well. But there's just way too many landmines for these guys to go 10-2 again. 9-3 is more likely. South Carolina was a little better than people expected, but it was still caught in the shuffle of the 6-6 teams. But you know what? After going a combined 6-16 in the last 2 years, I think their fans will take it. Shane Beamer appeared to get his feet under him and his pieces working together. He laid a foundation for the future in his first year. Now it's time for him to build on that foundation. And man, he got a big piece through the transfer portal to help out there. Spencer Rattler was as highly touted as you could be as Oklahoma's next big quarterback before the whole controversy with Caleb Williams forced him out the door. Despite what happened there, and despite how much I'm worried about how he's going to fare against SEC defenses, you can't deny that this guy has every single physical tool for the position that you'd want. The receiving core is going to be fantastic. Josh Vann led the team with 43 catches. DeCarrion Joyner and tight end Jaheim Bell, along with Oklahoma transfer tight end Austin Stogner. They're good and solid. And you're also getting Antoine Wells, who was a 116-catch, 1,800-yard, 21-touchdown receiver from James Madison, who's going to be a factor right away. Don't be surprised if the Gamecocks actually become one of the better offenses in the East Division. The defense was 6th in the SEC. They allowed 356 yards and 24 points a game, and while it wasn't great against the run or great in getting into the backfield, the pass defense did lead the SEC, and it was 7th in the nation, giving up 181 yards per game. It's a little deceptive because, everybody liked to run and not pass on them. Look for Cam Smith to continue to lead the secondary. He came up with 3 picks, and he broke up 11 passes last year. This is another team where the front 7 is fairly weak, and that's going to show against some of these NFL-caliber running backs they have to face. On the strength of the offense alone, however, I actually like this team to be improved over last year. The Gamecocks do get to miss Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State from the West. Now, obviously, South Carolina has one of the toughest perennial schedules to play, having to play everyone in the SEC East, 2 teams from the SEC West, plus the Palmetto Bowl against Clemson every year. But they get 3 cupcake games to open the season. Vanderbilt's a win. Tennessee, they get at home. That actually might be a shootout win. This team could very realistically take a step up and get themselves to a 7th win. There's enough beatable opponents on their schedule. Tennessee, home of one of the 3 most delusional fan bases in America. Fortunately, they did manage expectations better than usual last year. The emphasis was on, hey, come out and see fun, exciting offense. Super, super fast, lots of scoring, and they didn't really put too much emphasis on the amount of wins. And it was a good thing, too, because the defense was one of the most, if not the most, atrocious defenses in the conference. 422 yards and 29 points a game on average surrendered by the Volunteers. If you wanted passing, Hendon Hooker had it. 3,000 yards, 31 touchdowns, and only 3 picks. The guy was absolutely exceptional, and he's back for one more year. Leading receiver Cedric Tillman is back after catching 64 passes for almost 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns. Brew McCoy is coming in from USC to be a part of the fun, and tight ends Princeton Fant and Jacob Warren are good, solid mid-range targets. On defense, if I were a defensive player on this team, I'd be looking for the transfer portal as fast as possible. These poor guys had to be on the field 36, 37 minutes a game. You can't do that to your defense. It gets worn out, gets gassed, and it showed. The one bright spot for this team is that the linebacker core, they did at least take the middle of the field away. Jeremy Banks had 128 tackles last season, just insane. It's unfortunately because so many plays got past the front 4 that he had a chance to get so many tackles. Aaron Beasley across from him is great, 94 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. Jalen McCullough and Trayvon Flowers make a great pair of safeties, but they just have to run so much on so many plays. Good offenses are going to continue to get this team into shootouts, and they have to play a lot of good offenses. Their out-of-conference Power 5 game is on the road against Pitt. That's going to be a nightmare. At LSU, at Georgia, at South Carolina, Alabama at home. They do get a slate of easy games, too, though. They get Ball State, Akron, UT Martin, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. They should all be wins. Can this team do better than 7-6? Maybe. But it's going to be a major slog getting there, and they're going to have to put up 40 points a game. 8 wins, I think, is their absolute ceiling. Texas A&M, this team always looks so good, and then it never does anything. A&M just got themselves the number 1 recruiting class in the country, so much so that Nick Saban claimed that they bought their team, which, as we've said, is particularly hilarious coming from Saban. But yeah, 8-4 again last year. Since this team's moved to the SEC, they've just had 2 years with less than 4 losses. And one of them was the 2020 COVID year that hardly counted. I don't know how the school could have possibly positioned Jimbo Fisher for more success. The most dangerous player on offense is Devani Akani, who led the team with 9 touchdowns on 900 yards, averaging a gaudy 7 yards a carry. Every time this guy touches the ball, he's a threat to make a big play. The defense was absolutely elite, no question about it whatsoever, just a step below Georgia's in terms of overall talent level. But virtually all the stars from last year are gone, and it might be an off year while all the stellar new recruits get themselves into place and start learning the system. For veteran consistency, you have to turn to the secondary. The defensive backs allowed just 13 touchdown passes on them last year, with 10 picks. Safety Antonio Johnson was second on the team with 79 tackles. Damani Richardson had 65. And corners Jaylon Jones and Tyreek Chappell combined for 15 broken up passes. That level of talent alone is going to keep them in most contests. I don't think this is the year for the Aggies, but the next couple are poised to be pretty epic once their shiny new 5-star quarterback recruit is ready to take the reins. This year, the schedule is just brutal. I mean, they get Miami for their out-of-conference Power 5, and road games against 5 of the 6 toughest teams on their schedule in Arkansas, Mississippi State, Alabama, South Carolina, and Auburn. It's going to be a miracle if they can come away with 3 of those 5 as wins. Plus LSU at home to end the year. This is just not the year, Aggies fans. I'm sorry. 2023 and 2024 should be epic, but this is not going to be the year. 8-4 or 7-5, just get yourself excited about the future. Finally, oh yeah, Vanderbilt's here too, aren't they? What do you want me to say? It's Vanderbilt. They're here for tradition's sake, nothing more. They're certainly not an SEC team in terms of talent level. 2-10 last year. Everything about the team was god-awful. They didn't have anyone worth spotlighting, and they probably won't this year. They went 0-8 in conference play, and they're probably going to again this year. They should beat Hawaii and Elon. I don't know if Northern Illinois is a win, though. At Northern Illinois, I actually think that might be a loss for them. Another 2-10 year. Wrap it up. So there you go, the granddaddy. The SEC. Obviously, the question is, much like last year, who can beat Alabama and Georgia? And the answer is probably no one. So who's going to come in second? Well, the West is absolutely stacked. Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss are going to be battling it out. Everything's going to depend on the heads. Don't sleep on Mississippi State either. In the East, it's a pretty clear-cut Florida and Tennessee as battling for the second-place team. I think Florida's got the edge there. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's minds who's going to be playing in Atlanta come December. We did it, folks. A deep dive into every single one of the 130 D1 college football teams, and we got it in under the gun. College football season starts tomorrow with Week 0, and so does the return of the daily Live One Sports Capping Podcast. My summer vacation is all over. I can't wait to be back with you every single day. Let's get back to the grind. Let's make some money, and let's enjoy us some football season. I will see you tomorrow.